All right, we're excited to bring you into the tap room for this episode of the Craft Equation. We're taking a break from the studio and we're sitting down with our guest today, right here where the rubber meets the road, next to the taps. This is the Craft Equation, where conversations about craft brewing, business, and culture all come together. I'm your host, Cameron, co-founder of Mother Earth Brew Co. Now let's crack one open and get into it. All right, it's that time again. This is the Craft Equation, and we are here with Daniel Imdieke from the Master Cicerone program. How you doing, Daniel?
Good. Yeah.
Good to see you. Yeah, really appreciate you doing this. It's very cool to have someone this decorated, let's call it, out to our bar. So I know it's a little bit warm in here, but we're going to get through it. We
Cold beer. Yeah.
had to control the lighting and all that stuff, so you know how it goes. And the purpose of today's show really is to not just talk about beer tasting and some of the technical aspects of evaluating beer for industry professionals and get into some of the nerdy sciencey stuff that everyone knows and loves, but also to talk about how this is relatable for just your average consumer that's going out to buy beer off the shelf. Some of the best practices for making sure that their beer tastes fresh and things of that nature. But I wanted to start by talking about so what you do while you're here.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about the Cicerone program and what your role is.
Yeah, this is great. So business partner and I, Jason Pratt, just took over the program from the founder, Ray Daniels, in March of last year. And that was really a pinch me moment from a beer geek standpoint. Cicerone's meant a lot to me and to us over the years. It's opened a ton of doors. It's opened our minds on kind of all the endless kind of things you can learn about beer. And so really fun journey to kind of carry that torch on and see what we can do as the program evolves and as the industry evolves. So my day-to-day is running the ins and outs of the Cicerone program with our team and with Jason. And couldn't be more excited. This started as kind of an organic conversation when we did a tasting class here not too long ago. So this is great to be back. And been through, on the other side of all four levels of the Cicerone program, up to the master level and kind of know what it's like to sit in those chairs and study and the sacrifices and commitment people make to get there. So I think to the founder, it was important somebody like that took over the program, just understanding what it means to people and the time they put into it. So excited to kind of be one of the advocates for beer geekery.
Very cool. Well, that you are. And there's one thing I forgot to mention, which is the cardinal sin of this podcast, which is do not do it without cracking a beer. For those of you watching and listening,
cheers.
Please open yourself a beer. If you have it on draft, do as we do.
Let's help them with the heat.
We've got a taster flight here, and these are some of the beers that we're going to be talking about today. Just as examples, we might pour some more, but we're going to start with our German Pilsner. That's all-purpose Pilsner. That's what we just tried there, followed by a Helles. Also a lager, and then our new year-round West Coast IPA, Ascent. And then last but not least, we're going to move into a nitro stout. So kind of throw a little curveball in there. Should be fun. Talk about some beer gas and stuff like that and how it affects the product. So if you wouldn't mind, shed a little light on the Cicerone program. I know a lot of folks are familiar with the sommelier program. Obviously, that certification has been popularized by independent films like Somm and things of that nature. But obviously, Cicerone is just another, call it another arm, of sensory certification. And why don't you tell us a little bit, if you could, about how you got there, what the process looks like, how difficult it is it, and what separates a master from a level 1, 2, et cetera.
Sure. Well, obsessive craziness is the short answer to that question. But so it's, sommelier program has been around longer. Cicerone's been around just over, I think, 15, 16 years, right? So in the industry, well known. There have been a couple of documentaries and movies around the process, that show what that's like. But to your point, it's still not a household name, and we still have to say things like, it's like a sommelier, but for beer. And so one of our North Stars taking over the program is kind of getting it to a spot where we don't have to say that anymore, where it's just like Cicerone. It's like, oh yeah, that's a beer expert, right? And so that's a long journey and multifaceted, but I think the idea is to raise consumer awareness along with industry folks, where we've been fairly well established in the industry over the years, but to kind of bring that awareness around to consumers as well, what it means and what it can do. And essentially, we're out to show beer in its best light, curate the experience of beer in all aspects. So whether it's talking about sensory qualities, diagnosing things like off flavors or flaws, more fun, describing beer and differentiating them and talking about the history of the styles and things like that, pairing beer with food, kind of like how to properly serve it, the best way you can. So all those things together kind of bring together a kind of a show beer in its best light overall. And that's the kind of expertise we're trying to strive. So as far as the different levels, I mean, they're exponentially more difficult as you go. The first level is an online test, with a time crunch and a decent amount of knowledge, geared towards, we call it certified beer server exam, but it's geared towards beer aficionados and folks in the industry, but it's got a lot of front of house serving best practices and things like that. The level 2 has a written component that's over 3 hours with a couple of essays, a live demonstration that we film on beer service, and a live tasting exam. Third level is kind of a half-day version of that, so more essays, a couple of oral exams with beer industry experts, and then fast forward all the way to the master exam, which is 2 full days, 8 taste panels, 16 essays, and 12 live hands-on oral exams with industry experts in each field. So on that exam, it's like the person you kind of read the book on to get there might be the person that is asking you about brewing or beer and food pairing or hops or any of these other things. So it's just each one, there's a rabbit hole that you keep going down and you have passion for it. And it just, what separates the final level is people that really want to do it. I mean, the last level is a lifestyle a little bit.
Sure.
Every waking moment is spent, dialing in hands-on experience with beer, tasting, scouring the earth for every last bit of knowledge you can. And so I would say there's 28 folks that have passed that master level exam, and there is kind of an obsessive curiosity and like stubborn will to like make it happen that those that I've met all share. And so it's not for everyone, that last level, but it is one of those things that people kind of get addicted to learning more and more and more, and that's how I was. So, sorry, long-winded answer.
That's perfect. That's perfect, actually. And so is it safe to say then, I remember, again, this is just kind of my limited understanding of these programs, but is there a service component, kind of like the SOM exam, or is it more focused around sensory stuff?
It's a mix. So I think the service part, it's different from wine. There's a big, and not that there aren't rituals to beer, and we certainly focus on those, but there's a big kind of theatrical pomp and circumstance. Ours is somewhere, it incorporates things like that, traditional best practices, but yeah, it's geared towards how to pour beer properly, how to put the right amount of head on it so it maximizes the sensory qualities, looks great, minimize waste, all those things. We do, on the master exam, there is, troubleshooting broken draft systems. There could be cask ale things that you have to diagnose and work with. So, the hands-on component and the detail goes up as you go, but the service part, I mean, that's where the rubber meets the road, right?
Yeah.
So many hands touch beer from beginning to end when you think about the 3-tier system, and a lot can go wrong right at the end with how it's served.
Sure.
We're trying to be part of the folks that promote as the best practices we can.
Sure. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. Stored, served. I mean, there's so much that happens to so many hands touch a beer. I don't think folks really realize. We get emails to our inbox. Hey, I picked this beer up and it tastes funny or it looks funny. And, do you know what, is there something wrong with it? And it's like, man, that is a loaded question. I mean, where did you buy it? How was it stored? Was it temperature cycled? And so, the journey from the tank to the truck is really kind of the smallest or the shortest pole in the tent, right? You've just got so many other areas of influence. So that's a huge accomplishment, and congratulations. So if other folks did want to sort of dive down the rabbit hole and they saw this as a lifestyle for them, how do they get involved? If you want to sort of pursue some level of certification. Yeah,
so we Cicerone.org is our website, and we've got everything on there. The one thing we do have for free for anyone is a syllabus for each level. And so you can see kind of the expectation there and a resource list for each level. So from the beginning of the program, the idea was that we certainly offer our resources and teach classes, but the idea is to get folks with a well-rounded perspective. So there's a ton of different, read about brewing from multiple sources, read about hops from different sources, different beer styles. So all those things are on there. And then it's really, folks can either be led to water with some guided resources or study on their own from there. So there's, every person's different as you're kind of going back to school as an adult. So it's flashcards or digital flashcards now in this day and age. I still am like a handwriter on that. I'm old school, but and tasting and all that kind of stuff. People can do that on their own using that free syllabus and those resources as a guide, and then buy the books to fill in the gaps, because everyone has gaps, right? And so I came from the on-premise. I was in retail. That was my strength. I knew a ton of different commercial examples of brands. I knew draft systems, a little bit about beer and food pairing, not to the degree to which I then learned. But I never brewed beer when I started, right? So I've tried to fill in that gap by brewing beer, by talking to brewers, by learning some brewing science stuff. And so everyone's got those gaps, and those resources help fill those gaps.
Sure. Yeah, that's a really good point. So when we do actually offer reimbursement for Cicerone Level 1 for all our servers.
Great.
To encourage them to constantly improve their beer knowledge and whatnot. I think what's missing for a lot of hospitality staff is access to the production floor, which I think, having held virtually every position in this company since starting it, right? From toilet cleaner to brewer to now marketing. I knew when talking to folks, as much as they can read up, but you can read Randy Mosher's book 100 times, but until you spend one shift on the brew deck, that's when it really all kind of starts to come together. This is what mashing looks like, smells like, tastes like, feels like. So man, if people could get that type of holistic training, they would just be superstars.
Well, I think it does two things too. You look at a mash, fundamentally it's not super complex. People get intimidated by the brewing process, but it's here's some crushed up grain. We're going to mix it with hot water. Now, there's a whole bunch of science you can talk about in variables and levers you can pull. So it gives people both a bit of the demystification to see it in action, and then an appreciation as you talk about those variables for how hard some of those consistent hitting those targets at each step of the process. That's a challenge, right?
Sure.
And so it gives folks an appreciation for both sides of that.
Yeah.
Demystifies, but then also an appreciation for the craft a little bit.
Yeah, and I would say if I could give my 2 cents on the industry side for both brewery owners / managers, for your hospitality staff, get them on the brew deck, get them on the production floor, have them squeegee something for 30 minutes and just take in the sights and sounds. It will make them better beer. Not connoisseurs, beer professionals, ambassadors for your brand. And then on the side of folks looking to get their foot in the door or expand their beer career, ask your employer if those are some of the things that you can participate in. Yeah. They may not even know there's a level of interest there. So
yeah.
Anyway, well, thank you for that. I did want to get into some nerdy stuff, if I could.
Yeah, let's do it. Drink this pills while you do that.
Yes, please do. So, like I said, first half of this, I want to kind of focus on the audience here. Really, I think is more. This topic is going to be geared toward more industry pros and brewers and things. But some really, really fun and interesting tidbits for the average Joe as well. I wanted to know, what's an advanced sensory skill every brewer should master? If they had to pick one, and so this is assuming that it's a relatively newer brewery. They probably don't have a lab.
Right.
They're probably like a bootstrapped, brew pub, home brewer, convert, something like that.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think 2 things come to mind there. So foundationally, and I think folks say, well, yeah, this is we take it for granted, but I would say it's not true and for every brewery and every brewer. You have to know your beers, what they're supposed to be, and the common things that can go wrong with those beers, right? So if you're making IPAs, well, diacetyl applies to a lot of things, right? But what diacetyl is, hop creep, things like that. If you're making lager beers, understand things like sulfur and some of those things that are more commonly can send your beer awry for the types of beers you're making, and then know your beers really well, right? Because that to know when something is awry and without outside kind of the realm of acceptability it's a bit of a process, and not every brewer is well versed in that, or even well versed in the techniques, or has an interest in that. So I think knowing your beer and the most common things that can go wrong are a big part of that. And then the bonus advanced sensory skill I would dial into, and we've talked about this in some of the classes we've done, is to be able to describe beers, in a way that you can reach your taproom staff is a skill set not every brewer wants to have or is interested in having. And they may not every brewer is the point person in a brewery personality-wise with the taproom staff as an example. But the more they can say, like if you got 4 IPAs on and you're a brewer, you should be able to articulate what you were trying to do, how those are different sensorially, at least from your perspective, because that's the language your taproom is going to speak a little bit, right? And so there's that connection there when everyone's kind of has that skill set. There's a connection between the brew deck and the front of house. There's a connection to where it's more than just I'm pulling a tap on a wall. I understand the philosophy behind it. I understand how hard it was to get that. I understand the special hops or different things we might have put in it. And now we're all kind of speaking the same language. There's a connection there that I think not every brewery can make, and is a really valuable thing.
Okay, and when you first started addressing that question, you were talking about some specific off flavors.
Yeah.
What are really the ones that and we can, if you can either address it now or you can do it when we get into sort of the more layman's stuff. But from both a production or brewer standpoint as well as consumer standpoint,
right?
Maybe you want to wait on the latter half. I don't know.
Yeah.
But,
no, we can. They're probably similar to the ones we test on our certified level exam. There's 6 flavors we test, and the reason those are on that exam is because they do pop up, right? So diacetyl is one of those, right? It's part of every fermentation, and there's a ton of variables from maturation and yeast health that clean all that up. But
which is for those that don't know, a byproduct of fermentation.
Certain styles,
especially in Chardonnay, right? Like in wine, that's a good thing. In beer, bad thing. But it's a byproduct of fermentation. It's typically characterized by like a buttered popcorn type flavor.
Yeah, and one of the most common, because it can be any number of causes from Russian beer too fast, which in this day and age there's pressure to get beer out and sell it, right? To other fermentation and yeast health problems, to all the way to dirty draft line, right? Mm-hmm. Can be a contributor to that. So hop creep has become that big old thing with IPA brewing. So there can be a lot of things. So that's one. Acetaldehyde's one, because that's another maturation kind of issue, particularly with lager beers can pop up because it's one of those things that kind of takes time to clean up and convert to ethanol and all that stuff. So that's another. And then
which is characterized by like a green apple.
Yeah, green apple,
type.
Bruised apple kind of element. At high levels can be this like latex or emulsion paint, so it's like chemically apple.
Nice.
And it's present in all beers to some degree. So I think part of the reason, one of the things we talked about in our off flavor classes, some of them are not off-putting necessarily, but at high levels, it gets in the way, it distracts, it's not meant to be there, and it takes away from what your beer is meant to be, right? So acetaldehyde is one of those where a lot of people aren't super well versed in it because it's not buttered popcorn in a beer. It's not as jarring. It's apple, right?
Right.
And so, but at a certain point, it becomes just overwhelming. And so if you're not intending it to be there at the level it's in, we need to know that. So those are two brew house things. Sulfur is another one, especially with lager brewers. Mm-hmm. So things like H2S or hydrogen sulfide, which is kind of like boiled egg, rotten egg aroma. Again, low levels present in just about every pale lager you can find, but high levels it can be overwhelming.
But also acceptable at low levels in certain beer styles.
Yeah, so. and should be there to some degree, and adds a little bit to those beer styles, but can go awry, right? So a lot of these things are very much based on how much is there, what beer you're brewing. And then from the consumer side, whether we're getting into it now or not, the biggest thing is beer aging and oxidation flavors and those kinds of things. But from everything from kind of that papery cardboard note that you can get in old beer to aged hops that have fallen off and things like that. So those are and I don't know if you want me to go into those deeper, but we can.
Let's save it for the second. The second portion here. But that was perfect. That was perfect. So we're talking buttered popcorn. We're talking about green apple. We're talking about chemical flavor or aroma. One thing that I always have a hard time distinguishing is a lot of times as beer oxidizes and becomes more and more malty. Yeah. And I don't know if that's just because the hops are falling off, or if the malt's becoming more pronounced, or possibly both.
Both, yeah, yeah.
But I often will confuse that like overly maltiness that starts to come through as diacetyl. Like it's hard for me to it's like that's just super caramely.
I think that's part of it.
You're like, is there 100,000 pounds of like crystal 60 in this? Because it tastes like it.
Well, and over time, that caramel flavor becomes more pronounced. And then there's that overlap between butterscotch, buttered popcorn, which is diacetyl, and caramel, which are different things. But yeah, I can see why
to the untrained palate, right?
Yep.
And I mean, I have a pretty well-trained palate, and still, I mean, there's a lot of crossovers. So.
Sure, 100%.
So how do you judge whether a beer is true to style versus intentionally experimental?
So loaded question.
Have you done any commercial like beer judging for competitions?
So we get that question all the time. I haven't done a ton of that. It's something we need to do. It's not that we, it's not that I have anything against VJCP or wouldn't support that. I think we probably need to. Jason and I both need to be judging GABF, World Beer Cup, things like that. It just hasn't aligned with what I was doing in my career. Like it wasn't something I could really make time for. When I was in the thick of it studying for the master exam, I was fully focused on what Cicerone wanted to hear from me, not what the BJCP did. And then I have three young kids, so then it was like kind of done with certifications for a while.
And 5-day trips to Denver, all drinking all day long, every day.
So there's a point there where it's something I want to get more involved in, but understand exactly what you're talking about, and through the Cicerone journey, pretty well versed in beer styles and the nuances and things like that. So, to your question on how do you judge whether it's to style, again, some of that's in the eye of the beholder. The BJCP guidelines are what we use just because they're pretty comprehensive and based on a lot of research and tradition and things. And I think, brewers can go outside of that, and I think that's okay, right? But I think it's good to know what you're riffing off of. The traditional foundation a little bit before you kind of break the rules is probably something that's important.
I agree. And that side tangent to that, so we used to have a homebrew shop here, obviously, right next door when we very first opened. So there's homebrew shop in front, bar in the back, right, where we commercially brewed in the back.
Yeah.
And that was probably the number one thing that I saw is homebrewers love to come in, and a lot of them were very inexperienced, and they'd be like, I want to make a bubblegum grass clipping brown ale, and you're like, how about you make an American pale ale, just straight up? If you make a pale ale half as good as Sierra Nevada's, then I will let you make your grass clipping brown. How about that?
Right.
But anyway, that happens a lot, and I think especially because there are so many brewers that started as amateurs and then either started a business or went to work for another brewery, unless they had plenty of practice doing classic styles well prior to that. They try to carry that in, and you can tell right away. You look at a beer menu and you're like, this is very much like garage beer sometimes, And some guys do it really well, the funky stuff, and other times it's not executed as well. But
for me, there's two. You want to set a consumer's expectations, though, right? So if you are going to go vastly outside of what the style is kind of commonly accepted as, I would say you'd want to set your drinker up for that, because there are people with varying degrees. Some people don't know anything, but they'll know it's a lot different than what they've tasted. So if the typical ABV range caps out around 6% and yours is 8%, that's something somebody's going to want to know, or you're throwing weird ingredients in there. That's fine. I would probably skew towards setting expectations, and then it can't be an excuse not to make a beer well, right? So it's like, oh, it doesn't taste like it's a style. Well, that's because I was experimenting. It's like, well, that's not really a great excuse for that. But if, things like what we see now, like Citra dry hopped Pilsners, that came out of experimenting, right?
Sure.
But you shouldn't, I would argue, you wouldn't want to call that a German Pilsner, because it's not. That hop selection changes the expectation, right? Now I've got mango and passion fruit and funky tropical things, and that may be awesome, but it's not what someone would expect a German Pils to be.
Sure.
I think just to maximize someone's experience, they should have some expectation.
That's really, you hit the nail on the head there. So there's a big difference between what the brewer intends the beer to taste like and what the expectation of the person drinking it is.
Right.
And that's why, like, I think from a labeling standpoint,
Yeah.
like labeling beer accurately is important for the consumer. I know at one point there was a trend, like not to label a beer
There's a lot of that still,
style
right,
at all, because it's like,
Right.
well, I don't want there to be bias going into it. And it's like, well, look, if I want to listen to a death metal record and Frank Sinatra comes on, I'm going to be pretty disappointed, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Especially if that was $21.99 for those 4 beers.
yeah,
Right?
exactly.
So,
Yeah.
So for me, like, that's one of the advantages beer has to me over wine, in that someone can see Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon and go, I may know a little bit about like what that is, but there's, the lines for some people are really hard to kind of discern.
Yeah.
If one thing says IPA, one thing says brown ale, like, you know what those are.
Sure.
And so I think there's an expectation setting with styles and labeling that beer can do to make a shopping experience easier. Right now,
Right.
a layperson's shopping, think of somebody that doesn't know a ton about beer going into a beer store, a Total Wine. It doesn't even have to be that many beers. It can be much smaller than that, but they're like all the SKUs, all the different beers, and then half of them have weird can art and no label.
Right.
That, again, there's nothing wrong with any of that, but if you think about it from their experience, that can be overwhelming.
Right.
And I think that's part of what the industry is going through, is consumers not understanding all these nuances, and it's hard. The barrier of entry for some lay people is too high.
Well, that happened to me. We did a family trip to Europe, and my wife and I were in New York with our kids, and I went to a beer bar, and it said IPA, and they only had one IPA. It's like, I will have the IPA.
Right.
Well, on the East Coast,
Yeah.
IPA is New England IPA.
Yeah. Right.
Right? If you're wearing a Hawaiian shirt in Hawaii, is it just a shirt, right?
Right.
It's that whole thing. So
Right.
it shows up, and it's
Yeah.
like murky,
Yeah.
like not even just unfiltered,
Right.
like on the
Yeah.
sliding scale of murk,
Yeah. Super easy.
And I'm going, oh, this isn't what I ordered. And she says, well, that's the IPA. So anyway, to just reinforce what you said there, I think consumer expectations come into play a lot too when you're talking about that. One more question, just on the like brewer, on the production side of things.
Yeah.
If you're a small to medium sized brewery and you don't necessarily have a like sensory process or program protocol in place, where's the best place to start? What do you recommend folks do? Maybe just taking bite-sized pieces at first.
Yeah.
Do you necessarily need to go out and hire someone, a QA specialist, or do you think you can just kind of like, are there any resources that are available online to put a program together?
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of those. I mean, I think the short answer is I don't know that you need someone that only does that. It can be a point person that also has other roles in the brewery, someone who's interested in it, someone who has an affinity for it, or a brewer that is kind of technically into those things. But I think it's about tasting beer with regularity, knowing what good looks like, and then kind of having some sort of program in place to taste beers that go out to consumers, right? And that can be whatever's feasible at that level, right? It can be weekly, it can be batch to batch, it can be all these different variations, but to not do it at all, I would argue, is a mistake, just because it can save so much headache and problem and diagnose things. So
and
I
money.
think, right.
No one wants to destroy beer. So
Yep. And so the BA has some resources on there for like sensory panel, kind of on a smaller scale kind of things that are out there, because it doesn't have to be a lab and you spend $30,000 on off-flavor capsules and all that. It can be a much more limited version of that. And going back to the other part of the conversation, it can be training your folks on the key flavors that may pop up with your beers, right?
Right.
Like diacetyl. Like, everyone should probably know when that's has gone awry, and trying it in your beer, right? Not in a base beer like a Miller Lite. Try it in your beer, right? Try it in your flagship, try it in your Helles, try it in your IPA. See how that is, and then kind of know how that comes to life, so that if you taste it, there's a problem, right? So whoever those point people are, I think it's not unlike, I think, getting into front of house training. Like, beer training doesn't have to be a classroom 2 hours at a time. Everyone schedules a line. It's a daily occurrence.
Right.
It's a daily culture thing.
Yeah, it's a culture that you're training your palate. And the joke that everyone likes to reference in Psalm, the movie, is the freshly opened can of tennis balls, right? Mm-hmm. But there's a little bit of truth there, which is that if you expose yourself to all types of different aromas, flavors, you're building this library in your mind of things that you can then go back and reference. And I find that that's one of the biggest challenges, is just being that recall. I'm like, God, I know what that is,
right,
but I can't remember. And I guess at some level, like, that's what's cool about beer, is that it is all about the pure enjoyment. Whereas with wine, even though I guess it's up to the individual how they enjoy it and what level of analysis they put into it, it does feel culturally with that beverage that there's a little bit more training involved, meaning like, if you're not sitting down and quaffing it with a pinky out, that you're not doing it right. And I think a lot of people feel drawn to beer because there is not there is no pretentiousness to it. It's just all about the experience.
And I can say, even as a person representing the Cicerone program, like, that's the furthest thing from what we strive to be, right? And it's a little bit of a different, beer is different. It's the every man, every woman drink, it's the every person drink. It's accessible by all, price point wise and just historically. And so there can be those flavor nuances, but I think, one of the great things I heard Bill I say, who is a brewer owner of Bierstadt, when he talks about his Helles, is like, this is not a beer that is meant to be the conversation. This is a beer that's meant to be in the background of the conversation while you're connecting with someone, right? And that's
I love that. That's
really cool. I mean, that always stuck with me, because that's exactly what that beer is. Like, there's only so much to break down about it. It's a beautifully done beer, but it's not really meant to pinky out. It's meant to drink in quantity with friends, right? And so that part is not lost on me or the folks that I deal with in Cicerone on just enjoying it. So,
very, very well said. So that's actually a perfect segue into the second part of this discussion, which is sensorial review as it relates to John Q. Public sitting behind his bar now in the backyard. What's the easiest thing that someone can do to improve their beer drinking experience? Like, just practically speaking, right?
Yeah, of course.
And I think the cat's out of the bag on date coding, looking at the underside of the can. If you don't know this, we'll do a really quick review. When you shop for your beer, you want to just make sure to flip that can over. And actually, can you grab me a can so that I can...
Sure.
Why not? You know what? Almost everybody knows this, but I still find friends who, will bring beer over to my house. I crack it open and I'm going, oh man, it's like cardboard, and then I look at it and I'm like, where did you get this?
Right.
Like, really, in 2025, you're still buying 6-month-old beer?
I think you'd be surprised just about the average person still doesn't pay attention to that, and I still have plenty of friends that consider themselves pretty big beer fans that don't even really think about it. They just figure it's fine.
So we use Genesis dating. So the date that it was packaged. Other breweries use Best By dates, obviously. There are also breweries that use like a coding system. Yeah,
there's some websites that you can just Google and look up some of the beer date codes that do need to be cracked. I think the more transparent, the better. But there are, especially a lot of the European styles use Julian code dating or some sort of letter code or mix like that. So looking at that is number one. I mean, if it's cold and it's warm, buy the cold one. I mean, beer is exponentially fresher when it's stored cold. I mean, you're talking about 10 plus times the shelf life just going from room temperature to keeping it cold. And we don't know if that beer was cold, going back to our earlier conversation, from when it left the brewery all the way to the retailer. But in general, if they're keeping it cold, that's a good thing. Checking dates and even for the Genesis date, people don't know, like, code dates can be 120 days, 4 months. They can be 6 months. It can be a year.
Sure.
So you don't.
It depends on. Well, it depends on this. Yep. So let's go on a quick little tangent here, because I think this is really educational for people. The code date is somewhat arbitrary in that it is set by the breweries typically, and it is requested by the wholesaler. Right. Yep. So like our distributors are, when we load an item into their system, there's a field for shelf life. Right. behooves us to make sure that shelf life gives the beer the best chance to shine, right? And we don't want to deceive customers at all. And we don't want old beer out there, right? I'd rather destroy a bunch of beer because it's better for our brand if someone doesn't drink it.
Right.
But that's not always, possible, obviously, because of the number of points of distribution we have. You have to be reasonable with it too, right? Now, 100%. I don't drink IPA less than 30 days. Well, that's not true. I have beer in my fridge right now at home that's 60, but it came from my cold box, from my brewers, straight into my fridge. And so I know how it's been handled. Right. I don't buy beer that old, for sure. And so if you have that Pilsner, right, you could get 6 months out of that if it's handled correctly, right? I wouldn't prefer it, but it's drinkable. Yeah. Whereas an IPA that, it has a lot more in it, right? You've got binding sites for oxygen, hops, all this stuff. You got to be more careful with those.
Yeah, right? Yeah. So the hop volatiles are some of the first things to degrade, right? They're very fragile. They're very, flash off quickly or change quickly. And so that is, again, there's a level of people, I've seen in some of the beer forums, I won't drink this beer unless I get it 5 days old from the brewery. It's that's great. There are arguments to be made for some, going back to IPA, a measure of time for some
that
of those things
soon.
To kind of settle in a little bit, right? And that's cool. But yeah, to your point, there's an element of too long in the tooth, and there is beer like that out there. So buying the freshest you can, because most beer is not better aged. And, I used to have people bring Pliny the Elder that was I've been sitting on this for 2 years. And it says on the label, drink fresh, right? Yes. 2 years isn't going to be, this beer is not going to show up better that way. And so just consumers knowing that within a range of acceptability, right? And practicality, you're not going to find 5-day-old hazy IPA everywhere, right? So month or two kind of thing. A lot of that depends on the brewery, packaging, package oxygen, all the different things that go into what the brewery is doing and then how it's stored, all are part of that aging load. Right. And so it can be, you could have beer that's in code that has been poorly handled. Yes. That tastes terrible.
Correct.
And then you can have beer that just can take a beating because it's either been held cold or it's the packaged well, all those different things. Right. So yes, that is one thing I would encourage consumers just to be aware of as they're at these places is there might be a beer you want to buy, but if it's 9 months old, then maybe you choose something else versus risking it because it's going to be notably different. Right.
And I would say just in an effort to empower the consumer, what I would recommend is that people be vocal. Especially at the retail level. If you see beer that's out of code on the shelf, there's a process for making sure that beer gets swapped out and doesn't die there. Yeah. We don't want people drinking beer that's super old. Certainly that's not, out of code. Yeah. And, our distributor network, all breweries' distributor networks I haven't read everyone's contract, but as far as I know, they are responsible for rotating out inventory, right?
Typically, that's part of it.
In addition, there's culpability on the side of the retailer as well. Yeah. But it's the whole chain that everyone needs to be working together. So, by all means, you go to the store, you see stuff on the shelf that's super old. Make sure you let at a minimum, the cashier ask if the buyer's around, something like that, store manager, and just tell them, hey, you got to get this off the shelf, man. It's old.
Right. And then there's, some knowledge around some things like some of those Belgian strong ales can be on the shelf for a year, 2 years. And, bottle condition, yeast activity, all these different things help protect it and full flavored, all those kinds of things. So, beer freshness is, going back to your original question.
Yeah,
it's how do you enjoy beer at home? And then it's doom and gloom. There's a lot of really great fresh beer out there, but there is something to be aware of because if you go to certain places, there will be beer out of code that's offered 100%. For sale.
Yeah.
And so try to avoid it, right? The other thing I would say is pour your beer in a glass.
That's
we
a
can
good
get
one.
granular on it. Can be any, honestly, any glass versus can or bottle or whatever. Now, does that mean you go to someone's house and you carry your own beer glass around with you? No, you can drink it out of a bottle if you want to. But if you're talking about just one thing you can do to maximize the sensory quality is pour it in a glass, right? That's going to release all the volatiles. over.
Can you go
Yeah.
into a little bit more
Yeah.
detail of why that? And do you mind handing me a Becker pint and a taster glass? And if we have any other shapes down there that we can.
Sure.
My wonderful assistant Colleen.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yep. There's the Becker glass. Yep. Love those.
There we go.
Goblet.
Okay, so we got. Oh, look at this. We got a smorgasbord of
Great. Yeah.
glasses here.
And
Well,
so-
and then yeah. These are good. Yeah.
Yeah. So any of these are better than no glass, I would say, just from a sensory perspective, right? And you do you want me to keep going? Oh, you got
Getting up
Bill's
out of
glass.
frame.
Hey, that's
Okay.
a pretty one. You want to get that one in
There
there.
you go. Okay.
So yeah, I mean, so any glass, right, is better than none, and because what we perceive as flavor, 80 to 90% of that comes from our nose, right? Comes from our sense of smell. We can only taste, 5 to 6 basic tongue tastes. There's evidence that there's more. There, whatever that might be, but we can perceive thousands of volatiles, right? So most of what we think of as flavor comes from our nose, and that's released much more readily as the CO2 evolves in a glass, as you can stick your nose in it, stick your nose in the foam, all those different things, right? So any glass, right? You can take that as granular as you want, but practically, I'm a fan of having some like kind of like what you have here, like glasses that serve a purpose, right? So I'm a fan of having like I've got a beer a glass to put most of my lager type beers in, right? That's kind of pilsnery, kind of not unlike this, right? I've got like a catch-all ale glass I drink most of my IPAs out of, and then I've got a version of this goblet that I drink most of like my Belgian or high ABV beers.
Sure.
So practically, sensory-wise, they're going to be very similar. Now, can you take that to the nth degree? Like Spiegelau, who makes an IPA glass, a wheat beer glass, a stout glass, there's some cool sensory differences when you drink beer out of those glasses. But I would, just from a daunting consumer standpoint, you don't need to spend hundreds of dollars on glassware either to have a good experience. So that's part of it. The only other thing as I go on there, because I get excited about this, is that there's a bit of a romance and ritual piece to glassware, right? So like I own a glass from, I think, just about every Trappist brewery that's out there.
Wow.
And when I drink beer from that brewery, I put it in that glass. Now, is my sensory experience that much magnified? No, but it's cool, right? There's a whole ritual around pouring in that Rochefort,
Sure.
that Chimay glass that kind of connects to tradition and to the monastery. And for me, there's a bit of romance to that too. So there's an element of that, and you can take it as far as you want. But I would say there's a couple glassware shapes you should have at your house, and that's practically going to give you a good experience.
So I think what you're trying to say
Yeah.
is that everyone listening and watching should drink Mother Earth beer out of these pint glasses, and these are available at
There you go.
motherearthbrewco.com/store.
Yep.
You can get 2 of these. We'll ship them to your house.
Good catch-all shape.
They they can go to the dishwasher, and they're the perfect shape, is what I'm hearing from a master
Don't do that.
Cicerone, by the way.
Can't wait to hear about
Mandatory purchase.
that. Yeah.
No royalties at all for sales from the website.
Available here at the Vista Taproom online.
Yes.
Come on down. No, but I think that hopefully, like one of the things we're trying to do is and that's in the works for Cicerone, is a consumer-facing education program, right? For someone that doesn't necessarily want to take a test, or they take a test as part of it, but it's just a piece of reviewing the knowledge. But it is about how do I enjoy beer at home, not unlike the class we did here. What are some basic tasting skills I can do? What are some basic descriptor exercises that help me kind of wrap my head around flexing that muscle of describing beer better so I enjoy it more? I mean, that's really the end game, right? Is like, how do you enjoy it more? Well, you notice more things, right? And that can be fun, right? And so the more a consumer is versed in that and is aware of Cicerone, like that's a win for everybody, both industry side and the consumers that are like less daunted about just like having a good experience at home.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so getting back to we're going to dive a little bit more into the nerdy stuff here because I love it. When we're talking about selecting the right glass, what are some of the components that go into, like releasing the best aroma, presenting the beer in the right way, head retention, surface tension, all the things that go.
A lot of it is its accentuation, or kind of like not strengths and weaknesses, but like different glasses do different things. Where like if you've got an inward taper, it's going to concentrate that foam to being denser, right? It might last a little longer because of that. You might be able to stick your nose in it a little bit longer, but if it's wider, carbonation is going to dissipate more quickly. But for some of the higher carbonation Belgian ales, that may not be a bad thing from a filling standpoint, right? So there's give and take with almost any of those things. But I think with the more complex beer, you want to have room for volatiles to kind of express themselves, right? It's
So what wider mouth?
well, yeah,
essentially.
or like that got like this, but maybe slightly larger, kind of goblet version for. I mean, this is built for your high ABV beers, I'm sure.
Right.
So it's like a responsible amount to serve.
Yes.
But like, there are versions of that are slightly larger that just have that big bowl that you can stick your nose in, and you're going to get more out of it that way, right? And so even with IPAs, there's an element of like having some headspace or some curvature. Some people will say that traps volatiles in. Some people say the opposite. Like, there's a lot of ways you can take it, but like anything with beer stuff, there's schools of thought, I would say.
I find that, and even though we use these, right, because you got to choose something for chasers,
Yeah, of course.
right?
Yeah.
And while I'm having a lot of fun drinking these with you, because I usually don't get taster flights,
Yep.
not just because I'm somewhat principally against them, because I just like holding a solid
Committing
pint
to
in
a
my
pint,
hand.
sure.
But the other thing is, I find that this, and I would call this, like, I guess, more like a miniature Pilsner type glass.
Yeah, it's got some overlap between like an English ale glass and a Pilsner glass kind of shape, right?
It's practical, right, for our bar here.
Yeah.
I also find it to be like aromatically suppressive, if you will.
Yeah.
Like, I'll have a beer in here that I have like pretty routinely that I know the aroma on really well, and I'll pour it in here, and sometimes I can't get anything out of the nose.
Yeah, it's small. You're not going to get a ton of volatiles that you can stick your nose in, right? I mean, I think part of
volume plays a role.
It can. I mean, so like when we do our Cicerone exams, you get a 2-ounce sample of beer in an 8-ounce cup, right? And so the first thing you do with that is you swirl it.
Sure, you can
right?
agitate the hell out of it because there's a lot of space, right?
Right. And so, in the everyday drinking experience, are you just going to sit there and rotate, swirl your beer a ton? No, but if you have a little bit of room to kind of swirl it and stick your nose in, that's going to give you kind of that release. And that's so some of those glasses you'll see, like the fill line is here, and then here's the foam line. And then as that goes down, you drink the first few things, you see people kind of swirling them, being able to get more out of them. So that would be the other kind of thing for folks at home is like swirl your beer and smell it because you're going to get more out of it.
Right.
And so some of that, like there's not a lot of opportunity for that here, right?
Right.
Not a lot of opportunity for those volatiles to build up and kind of give you a big rush or something. It doesn't mean that, like you said, this is not a bad choice for your tasting.
Yeah.
It's just the taster glasses in general are going to be like that. And it's just hard to get the same experience. Now, how much does that matter? If you tried it side by side, 8 out of 10 people might be like, well, that's the same to me, but
Sure.
To show beer in its best light, yeah, there's an element of having room for volatiles and things. And that's why, like Spiegelau's IPA glass, it's giant. And when you put a beer in it, it doesn't fill it up all the way, so you can swirl it.
That's
and
a great point, because I noticed in Europe that's a pretty common thing, right?
Yeah, they got
like,
fill lines
you don't
of
get a
foam
full
and-
glass.
yeah.
Like it's like 80% full.
And you get a big thing of foam.
Yes.
Yep.
I want to get to the importance of serving beer with a head. When I'm at home, actually, a pro tip for the folks at home looking for ways to make their beer better, I like to pour my beer out of a can into a glass that's at least 15 to 20% larger than the can I'm pouring in.
Sure.
And not just for the swirl effect, but I can get much more aggressive with the pour. And I can really kind of throttle it down the middle of the glass to open up a lot of those aromatics and stuff.
Sure.
And that's what you're getting. I feel like you're getting that in a bar setting, right? Because there's no back pressure or anything to stop the beer from coming out of the tap. It's just being propelled straight into the bottom of the glass. You can create like some nice agitation.
Yeah.
Whereas at home, if you're pouring a 16-ounce glass into a 16-ounce standard Libby mixer, you have to be careful or you're going to overflow all over the counter. So you're not really giving it a chance, to open itself up. So try pouring in a larger glass. I think you're going to see some better results.
Or not pouring the whole beer at once, right? And just giving yourself like a big foam cap and giving yourself some room. That's one thing you can do too.
Yep. So foam.
Yeah, sure.
Please talk about the importance of beer foam, because
Charlie Bamforth wrote a whole book about it.
Why is foam important?
I mean, for most of the reasons that you kind of went into already. So aromatically, it's a place for those volatiles to kind of hang out and sit, right? There's folks that say, well, it caps your beer, it protects it from oxidation. the amount of oxidation it's going to experience at the rate
that
most
short
people
amount of
drink
time,
it is not going to be significant. But just from a volatile release standpoint, one, it's good. From a presentation standpoint, I'd argue if you get a beer that looks flat filled to the top, sent to your table, and then you have one side by side with this nice, like looks like a beer commercial kind of thing, those lead my, like, the power of appearance is a big thing, right? So from the beer color to all that, this one is going to look like, is the beer flat here? Is this old? Like, what's going on with this? This looks fresh, inviting, effervescent. So there's an element of that's there. And then functionally, from a service standpoint, if you've ever tried to put a beer that's full to the top onto a table, where does that beer go? All over the person, right? And all over the table. So it gives you a better sensory experience. It caps it so that you're not covered in beer when it's dropped off. And it just looks more appetizing and just kind of like primes you for a better experience.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So
now, whether or not you top those beers off for your guests because that's what's going to make them happy, that's up to you to decide. And some folks want it topped off, some don't. Like in Europe, it's a very serious thing to like get your proper amount, which is why they all have these fill lines, and then the foam. It's like a standard thing where you and the bar person can kind of make sure it's on the up and up.
Yeah.
So,
but we don't deal with that as much these days. Yeah. And it also depends on what type of establishment you have, right? Like there's always going to be the folks that are looking to come in and just, they want bang for their buck, and they're going to get a buzz. But
I worked in the yard at the early days of the Yard House. I was with them for about 10 years in the first part of my beer journey. And we would have people, and this is, early 2000s, so probably not quite the level of education people have today. So we get it more often. And, our general policy was like, if someone asks that, we're going to just make them happy because it's an extra 2 ounces of beer. Because not everybody's going to want to hear the diatribe on, well, actually, what you should do is, but as things have evolved, I think there's probably more room for that conversation than there was back then.
Yeah,
to your
for
point.
Sure.
So,
if I could take a right turn here, well, not entirely because we're talking about beer foam.
Sure.
But since we're kind of finishing up, by the way, what do you think of that IPA that you just?
I like it.
I
like your set. Yeah. That was one we tasted.
I think we tried that here. Yeah,
I like it.
But I have moved on to the milk stout,
okay.
And this is a nitro milk stout.
Mm-hmm.
So we do this year round as well. We have a CO2 version, a nitro version. If you'd like to try this, you can find it. Go to our website, click Find Beer. You can enter your zip and filter by brand. You can do that with any of the beers that we're tasting today. So when you're talking about nitro beer, I want to, if you don't mind, I'm going to tell you what I read about nitrogenated beer.
Okay.
Please don't call it nitrous. Please don't do that. That's Fast and Furious.
It's a different thing. Yeah.
Nitro beer is short for nitrogenated, which is a lot different than nitrous oxide. So
it is indeed.
Yes. I just want to make that distinction real quick. Yeah. Okay. So my understanding of nitrogenated beer is that it was used to simulate the mouthfeel that was found in real ale or cask ale.
Yeah.
And that obviously, so I'm going to do a really quick history lesson. This will be the Cliff Notes. And feel free to jump in and correct me here.
Just go for it.
So back in the day when beer was cask conditioned, when it was almost done fermenting, they would seal up the barrels. Whatever residual fermentation occurred in the barrels created pressure, which slowly and partially carbonated the beer. Obviously not to the degree that we drink it today, because that would just blow the bungs out of the casks. But this was pre-compressed gas, right? So that was the only way they could do it. Carbon dioxide loves to be cold, and it loves to be under pressure, right? High pressure plus cold equals readily absorbed, right? And so at some point, rather than deal with the hassles of that cask conditioning, we took an inert gas like nitrogen that's not readily absorbed into liquid. It takes a lot more pressure. We forced it into beer at a certain percentage, roughly anywhere between 20 and 30%, average 25, and that's what we know to be beer gas, Guinness gas. I'll have to bleep that out because I don't want to advertise for them. Or mixed gas. And we started forcing that into the beer column to simulate real ale or cask ale. And so what that led to is what we now understand to be nitro beer. And the reason that it's got it's basically what a lot of people call flat, it's actually only 25-ish% carbonated. The 75% is the nitrogen immediately leaving solution, correct? After it hits the glass, and that's the cascading effect that you see in the glass.
Right.
Did I?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're spot on. I think the history part of that is my understanding of it too, because you're looking at a much less carbonated product when it comes to real ale, and so I think it probably started that way. And that Irish brewery you mentioned, they
whose name we shall not mention.
They were originally a porter brewery, right? And porter was the dominant style in England of the day, right? And so how do you mimic that? Well, then the nitrogenated beer came along, but then that became associated with Guinness, and so that ritual became like the signature thing for that beer,
right?
And so you don't see a lot of. I mean, it's come full circle where you do see some nitro versions of other styles, but for a long time it was very much dark porter and stout kind of nitro beer, kind of to mimic that, and based on the popularity of Guinness. But yeah, creamier mouthfeel. So it's not going to have that carbonic bite of that carbonation in solution. It tends to emphasize malt flavors more and de-emphasize bitterness. So, I mean, you can kind of try, there's beers, if you try them both ways, it's a fun sensory practice to do where you might get a little bit of different experience on perceived bitterness, malt flavors, kind of what dominates, what doesn't, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I actually don't like my IPAs on nitro, generally speaking. Like, it's not that they're offensive or anything. I just don't like them as much. No. But I will say we used to do our triple IPA Big Mother on nitro, which is a 10.5%, like 130 IBU triple IPA. I found that one to be, I don't want to call it better, but really interesting on nitrogen because, like you said, it kind of cut down a little bit on a lot of those like really intense hop flavors.
Yeah, and some of those, like, if they're
alcoholic.
It's going to smooth out, and some of those volatiles aren't going to just like overwhelm you because they're not in an effervescent, medium or whatever. So I think there is an element of that. I mean, one of the things I did for the master, there's a brewery in Denver called Hogshead that still makes some of the best cask ale in the U.S. And we tried.
They're holding it down, huh?
Yeah, I know.
Last remaining We've got a graveyard of firkins and pins back there, and it's like, what do we do?
It makes me so sad because it's such a cool art form and a lost art form, and they've made it work there. But they have at any given time 2 or 3 of their flagship beers or core beers on traditional draft and on cask. And so part of the exercise we went through when we were studying for the exam and stuff was try them both ways, and then the whole sparkler on the cask on the beer engine where you're getting a head versus no head. Like, this is how nerdy people are to pass that exam. So, but just that's just an interesting sensory thing because it brings out different aspects and highlights different aspects of a beer. There's no one right way. Yeah. It just highlights different things, to your point, even with your triple.
Cask ale is so fun though.
Yeah.
I mean, cool. Driving that thing in and then it's like handling vinyl. It's the whole vinyl movement. It's just one more way to interact with the beer.
Yeah, it's about as fresh as you can get it, right? Because you're tapping it right when it's ready.
Yep.
So
very cool.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've pretty much exhausted what we have time for with regard to sensory stuff, unless you've got something specifically that you want to.
It's up to you. Yeah. No,
We can. This is actually a good pause point, so I'm going to trim it right here and just see. Yeah. I didn't want to like stare at the paper while you were.
Yeah, and
So let's see where we're.
Sorry if I went off on the lot of tangents.
That was perfect.
Like it's part of
I was leading you anyway, so.
Yeah. So.
Oh, I want to talk beer and food pairing.
Okay. See, you got to.
Oh, I was wondering. You know what? It looked a little bit lighter. Yeah. Oh, that's okay. I mean, yeah, that's fine. I want to talk beer and food pairing for sure. Anything else that you want to specifically?
It's up to you. No, I mean, if there's any of these other questions, breweries train their staff more confidently about flavors, irrelevant. Are we kind
Yeah,
of
we
into that a little
we
bit?
can do that.
I have you food pairing. Yeah, I mean, whatever you think is things people want to hear about, I'm good with however you want to do it.
Let's do, because if we go back there, I'll have to really do some surgery. Let's
Yeah, that's
let's do
Go to me.
we did glassware. It was okay.
Cascade.
Let's do. I'm going to move straight into beer and food pairing, if that's okay.
That's
with
fine
you.
with me. That's
Okay.
fine.
All right.
What do
Cool.
we got? Good on that.
All right. So I want to kind of segue to our final topic. That's
Sure.
beer and food pairing, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
this is a big one. It's probably going to get, on YouTube, they've got the, most replayed section
Yeah,
now.
right.
So I'm sure this is going to trend there. But what do you think is the best way for folks at home to approach food and beer pairing?
Sure.
I know that's a really generic question.
No,
but-
it's a great question, and I'm laughing because we are trying to wrap our head currently at Cicerone on how to release a product that does it justice. We've done some one-off courses around it. It's so experiential. It's subjective. There's no one book you can read that's going to get you all the way there, or is like the one school of thought that is the way. And so we're trying to kind of wrap our heads around that. But yeah, so anyway, to answer your question, how do you get started? I think it's understanding why beer and food are good partners to begin with, and then tapping into that. So I'll pause there if you have
No, that's yeah.
Okay.
Continue. That's perfect.
So beer is a food product, right? And so it's if you think about what it's made from, cereal grain is a staple of there's a cereal grain in almost every food tradition out there, right? That grain is toasted or cooked to some certain degree, right? And those chemical compounds you get when malt is cooked in a kiln are the same chemical compounds you get when you do things like saute something in a pan, grill it over a flame, like those kinds of things. So there's an easy harmony resonance. Like Maillard browning, caramelization reactions, those kinds of things. So wine is a worthy food partner, but wine doesn't have cooked flavors, right? So there's that easy harmony starting with that right there that just makes sense to a lot of people when you're pairing beer with food. Hops contain a lot of the same aromatic compounds that are found in spices. So you can find overlap in things like cilantro and thyme and marjoram and bay leaves and all the black pepper, all these different things that you use in cooking are in those aromatic oils and hops. So you've got resonance there. And then fermentation flavors. I mean, a lot of traditional foods are fermented, let alone the kind of the fruity, spicy notes that can come from fermentation. So there's this through line with beer and food that the starting point is always we call a through line is make this make sense. Why did you pair these two things together? And that starts with what we call complementary flavors. What's kind of like with like, and that doesn't have to be exactly the same. It means if you think about voices singing in harmony, they don't all sound the same. They're just in the same key, right? So, and what I mean by that is if you've got something, and we see it with desserts a lot of times. If you've got a chocolate dessert, a chocolate beer isn't necessarily the way to go, but something with vanilla in it might be, right? Because those two things go together, right?
Like
right?
Cali Cream,
right? Yeah.
Which you can go find if you visit our beer finder.
That's where I was going with that.
At motherearthbrewco.com/locator.
But even some of the coffee and mocha notes you get in Milk Truck, right, are different than just chocolate with things like that. So there's this easy resonance on toasted bread, toasted pizza crust with a beer with toasty malt flavors, right? And so you start with that harmony, and there's a much further rabbit hole to go down when you start talking about contrasts and aromatic things and mouthfeel. And
sure,
you can take it as far as you want, but start with something that kind of makes sense from an ingredient standpoint. One of the things we've said is match the color of the food to the malt color of the beer kind of thing. So it's if it's toasted, toastier beer. If it's grilled, kind of darker porter, roastier beer, and you're going to have some easy resonance there. Now, to make the pairing exciting, you do have to have some contrast, but there's built-in contrast with beer and food. You think about something like sausage, it's always saltier than beer, right? And there's a savory umami component. So your beer is going to have this sweet, salty or bitter, salty contrast that's compelling. And that's where you kind of start to tap into those kind of things there. And then the last kind of, again, foundational principle a lot of people have probably heard is something called cut. Beer's carbonation refreshes your palate. It's kind of scrubs, the fat and oils that stick to your tongue, kind of mutes your palate. Between alcohol kind of acting as a solvent and that carbonation, it's going to kind of like whisk all that away. So it makes every bite like the first. So if you just like tap into those kind of 3 elements, and then it's trial and error. And like, basically what we've done in our workshops is you get 2 different kinds of wings and 4 beers with different flavor profiles, and you try them and you say, I thought this one would go well with this. I was right. Or like, hey, this is a surprise. I didn't think these would go well together. On paper, that's not a good pairing, but this works. Then you try to like figure out why. It's one of those it's like the last frontier from a Cicerone standpoint, because it's one of those things you can't just read a book and regurgitate something. Like I said, there's no one book, but then there's just like all these like, but experiential, it only comes from experience kind of things. And so you have to be really comfortable talking about flavor. And that's the hardest part of our exams, is that fluency with flavor vocabulary, all the nuance and complexity that you can describe in both beer and food. It's kind of like the ultimate test of that. And then you talk about how they go together. So that it's just, it can be overwhelming, but to make a good pairing, I'm going on and on here. I'm sorry.
No, it's perfect.
You ask a question and I'm like,
yeah.
You're like, how am I going to edit this?
No,
this guy
not
keeps
at all.
going.
This is gold. No,
But no, so it's one of those things where like you can make a good pairing if you like the other thing I didn't mention, which I should have mentioned straight off the bat, is matching flavor intensity, right? If you start, and that means the intensity of the beer is the same as the intensity of the food, right? Is roughly in the ballpark, right? More intense beers with richer food, less intense beers with more subtle flavored food. So that's so you can get that marriage of flavors. Otherwise, one's going to overwhelm or run over the other one, right? So you start with that. If you do that, and if you match flavor intensity, which can mean a lot of things, right? Bitterness can go a long way. It's not just ABV, just overall flavor intensity of a beer. And then with food, you're thinking about how is it cooked, what kind of sauce is on it, all those things. If those things are in balance and you've got some harmony, you're going to make a good beer and food pairing. And then that's how you start. And then you go from there and go, I would tweak this. I would add this sauce. I would actually choose this beer instead. Again, there's no way to just like study from a book for that. It's really good getting out and doing it, getting 3 cheeses and a bunch of beers and trying them all together and creating your own internal Rolodex. So
that is like way more than I expected, but also in some ways not enough.
Yeah.
Like it's never enough, right? And I think that's kind of the point, is that it's a moving target.
Cool. Yeah.
Sir, thank you for the conversation.
Yeah, man, I hope that's
really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Oh, it was epic. Thanks to my guest, Daniel. What a conversation. I think we need to have him back out.
Yeah.
Let us know what you think in the comments.
Or don't if
you liked it, let us know in the comments. Please like, subscribe, and set that bell to remind you when new episodes drop. Don't go far. The Craft Equation will be back in a couple weeks.
Thanks, Cameron.
All right. Like what you see? There's more where that came from. Check out our other content or find us wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to drop a comment and let us know what topics you'd like to see covered on the Craft Equation.